These stories don't get covered. You know another story that has not been covered by the mainstream media?
What's that?
That 1 year after the collapse of Wall Street, which really started in large part by what happened in 1999, when Congress, under Bill Clinton and the Democrats, pushed Fannie and Freddie to give loans to people who could not afford to pay back those loans, those mortgages. Now, there were a lot of people warning the White House that this was going to cause serious problems, would cause a bubble that would really blow up and destroy the economy. The guy leading that charge, Ron Paul.
Absolutely.
Who on September 10th, 2003, in a banking committee hearing, predicted exactly what was going to happen. But you know what the media never reports? That the single biggest recipient of cash from Freddie and Fannie, from executives, after he got in Washington, D.C., Barack Obama.
Oh, there you go.
Now, Chris Dodd, over 20 years, raised more from these Freddie and Fannie execs. But Barack Obama at the top of the list once he got into town in 2005. It hasn't been reported on one time. And by the way, these are a lot of these, Franklin Raines, the CEO, who has had criminal charges leveled against him. And taxpayers, of course, are paying his legal bills for some sick, gross reason. New York Times reported that a couple. But this is not reported on.
No, and I think people are beginning to. We saw that poll yesterday, the Pew poll. People are losing trust in the media. There's a whole shift happening out there in terms of the public sentiment. In terms of what has happened over the past year, people are beginning to say, what is going on?
Well, I want to talk about the one guy, though, that did tell the truth on Capitol Hill. His name's Ron Paul. He, of course, ran for president last year. He has been a hero of libertarians and small government conservatives for a very, very long time. Of course, there aren't many small government conservatives left walking the planet, but for the few of us that are still here, have great respect for Ron Paul. He's with us. Ron, a year after Lehman Brothers and the collapse of the American economic system as we know it, what are your thoughts? You're the guy that predicted this was going to happen. It happened. Have we learned any lessons from our mistakes?
I think the people are waking up, and they've learned a whole lot, and they're searching for even more answers. But I don't think the people in Washington have learned very much, because they're going right back to the very people who created our problems and asking them what is wrong, and they're listening to them. On the business news stations, frequently they will interview these people and say, well, it's all behind us now. There's economic growth now. Everything's going to be okay next week. And they're the very people who didn't have any idea that this was coming. So there's a lot of misleading information still out there, but there's a disconnect between what the people are thinking and demanding versus what the establishment and the politicians and the regulators are thinking about.
You know, Ron, liberals have been trying, and we're talking to Ron Paul, of course, Republican presidential candidate last year. He's written a new book called In the Fed, a United States congressman that's been fighting for smaller government for decades now. Ron, I always explain to people when they attack this economy and says, see, September 15th proves that capitalism failed. I always tell my story, and I know you have the same exact story. People in Congress, when we're sitting there in Congress, the corporate lobbyists come in, and they never ask us for a free enterprise system. They never ask us to have free, unfettered capitalism. They're always looking for advantages. They're actually always looking for excuses to pervert the free market. Explain how that happens.
Well, it is. People learn that they can make more money hiring big lobbyists than they can investing in R&D. But the system itself is built that way, and since they're rewarded if they spend more time in Washington than back home working, they keep doing it. But what it leads to is eventually it destroys our productive capacity, and that's why we become less competitive as our jobs go overseas. And a few people make more and more money, but finally it catches up to us. The debt gets too big, the inflation hits us, the malinvestment hits us, and then there has to be a correction. Then everybody's yelling and screaming, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And what do? more government, more spending, more debt, more borrowing. So it's coming to an end, and I think that's why people are pretty upset. I think people are upset on left and right. I don't think it's just the right that's upset with Obama. I think the left are upset maybe for a little different reason. They know there's something wrong. They're scared to death that the welfare machine might run broken. They might not get their stuff that they want. But the right wing doesn't seem to be concerned about financing their extravagance when they go toward overseas activities. But the majority of the American people know there's something seriously wrong. I believe there's something seriously wrong. I believe the status quo cannot be maintained and that we have to look at some basics. And, of course, the one basic that I've been preaching about for many years to try to prevent these problems is the monetary and financial system.
Now, we're going to talk about the Fed in 1 minute, but let's talk about Afghanistan. Is the president making mistakes if he sends more troops to Afghanistan like the generals are asking for?
Absolutely. He should be bringing those troops home, and he should be bringing the troops out of Iraq like he said he was going to do. He's locked in. Policies have not changed. It is not good for our national security. It participates in our bankruptcy. It's a disaster. The sooner we wake up, the better. But sending more troops into Afghanistan, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Just more and more people are going to get killed, our people and their people. Last weekend, the review came out about the NATO bombing. 99 Afghanis were killed. That means 99 more families are going to be dedicated the rest of their lives to try to do harm to Americans. It makes no sense for us to be there.
We're talking to Texas Representative Ron Paul. Ron's written a new book called In the Fed. Now, educate me here, Ron. Why should we get rid of the Federal Reserve? And what takes its place?
Well, the market can take its place, but we want to get rid of it because it's a total failure. Its obligation was to preserve a sound dollar and stable prices and low unemployment. Well, unemployment, even according to government statistics, when you add it all up, is 16%. Free market economist says it's closer to 20%. And we don't have a sound dollar. We have a very unsound dollar. We are working on about a 3-cent dollar compared to the dollar the Federal Reserve inherited in 1913. And they were the ones who caused the political crisis, the economic crisis and the collapse. So they manufactured the bubbles. So there's no good that comes from the Fed, except they do prop up their special interests. Wall Street loves it, and Wall Street's even benefiting now from some of these bailouts. But the unemployment rate keeps going up, and the people are suffering. The few people who do save money, they get cheated because they get 1% on their savings, and the banks are making more money than ever before. But the market can replace this. We lived a good while without a central bank. One of our periods of time with the greatest economic growth was in the latter part of the 19th century, and you didn't have a central bank doing central economic planning. But the worst part about the central bank, it's all done in secrecy. They are the counterfeiters. They can counterfeit billions, if not trillions of dollars. They pass these out to their friends, and we have no oversight. So, of course, my first step, ending the Fed, is the ultimate goal, but the first step is to audit the Fed and find out what they're doing, who their friends are, who they bailed out, why Lehman failed, and what kind of conversations went on there, and why Goldman Sachs came out golden. That's the kind of stuff we need to get to the bottom of.
And they did. Goldman Sachs, my God, they struck it rich. Even richer. They hit the jackpot. Ron, thank you so much for calling in. We really do appreciate it. It's always great talking to you.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, you're talking to Ron Paul. He's written a new book called In the Fed. And you know what? He is dead right about Goldman Sachs. They talk about the rich getting richer. And they've got all these friends in the federal government. They always have friends in the federal government that always take care of them.
He's dead right, and he has been dead right. I remember when you were working on your book and you pulled up old quotes from him, and he predicted everything.
He nailed it.
Nailed it.
No, and they thought he was crazy then. They think he's crazy now. But no, he was right.
Not so crazy.
Not crazy at all.
Okay.